After 47 years of silence, Elvis's closest friend is finally ready to tell the truth. What if I told you that the man who stood next to Elvis Presley every single night for 8 years has been keeping secrets that could change everything you thought you knew about the king? James Burton isn't just any guitar player. He was Elvis's most trusted musician, the man Elvis called his brother, and the only person who saw what really happened during Elvis's final days. Now at 85 years old, James is breaking his silence for the first time, and what he reveals will shock you. James Burton was born on August 21, 1939, in a tiny town called Dubberly in Louisiana. His family was poor, really poor. His parents, Guy and Lola Burton, worked hard just to put food on the table. But James had something special in his hands. When he picked up a guitar, magic happened. He never took lessons. He never had a teacher. He just played, and somehow, he could make that guitar sing like nobody else. By the time James was a teenager, people started talking about this kid from Louisiana who could play guitar like he was born to do it. When James was just 17 years old, he made the biggest decision of his life. He packed up everything he owned and moved to Los Angeles. Most kids who tried this ended up broke and broken. But James was different. He joined a band with a young singer named Ricky Nelson, who was becoming famous on TV. James played guitar for Ricky for over 10 years, and during this time he created something that would make history. In 1957, James wrote the guitar part for a song called Suzy Q. That guitar sound became one of the most famous riffs in rock and roll history. But here's the sad part. James never got credit for it. He never got paid for it either. The music. Business was cruel back then, and James learned that lesson the hard way. Through the 1960s, James became what musicians call a session player. This means he played guitar on other people's songs without getting his name on the record. He played for Johnny Cash, the Everly Brothers, and many other famous singers. James was like a ghost in the music world. Everyone knew his guitar sound, but most people didn't know his name. He was making great music, but he felt invisible. Some nights, James would sit alone in his apartment, listening to the radio play songs with his guitar on them, feeling proud but also empty inside. Then, in 1969, everything changed with one phone call. Elvis Presley needed a guitar player for his comeback shows in Las Vegas. Elvis had been watching James for years. He knew James was the best guitar player he could find. When Elvis called, James almost said no. He was scared that working with Elvis would mean losing himself in Elvis's huge shadow. James spent the whole night thinking about it, sitting on his porch with his guitar, playing every song that meant something to him. By morning, he knew what he had to do. He would work with Elvis, but he would never give up being himself. The first time James met Elvis backstage, Elvis looked him right in the eyes and said, "James, I need you to help me make the best music of my life." That's when James knew this wasn't just a job. This was going to be something special. Elvis put together a band called the TCB Band, which stood for Taking Care of Business. James was the leader of the band, and Elvis trusted him completely. Every night when Elvis wanted a guitar solo, he would turn to James and shout, "Play it, James!" Those 3 words became famous all over the world. James played a regular red guitar at first, but Elvis had a different idea. One day, Elvis gave James a special pink guitar with a swirly pattern on it. It was called a pink Paisley Telecaster. James wasn't sure about it at first because it looked so different, but Elvis loved it, and from that day on, James played that pink guitar at every single Elvis show. It became James's trademark, the thing people remembered about him. For 8 years, from 1969 to 1977, James was by Elvis's side almost every day. They played hundreds of shows together, traveled all across America, and made music that millions of people loved. But James saw things that the fans never saw. He watched Elvis struggle with pain, with loneliness, and with the pressure of being the most famous person in the world. Elvis took pills to sleep, pills to wake up, and pills to deal with pain. James was worried about his friend, but Elvis always said the show must go on. James remembers one night in 1975 when everything almost fell apart. Elvis was having a really bad night. His voice was cracking, and he seemed lost on stage. After the show, Elvis broke down crying in his dressing room. He told James he felt like a fake, like he was stealing money from people who came to see the old Elvis from the movies. James sat with Elvis for hours that night, not saying much, just being there for his friend. That's when James realized that being Elvis Presley was killing the real man underneath. The pink guitar that James played wasn't just an instrument. It was a symbol of their friendship. Elvis had picked it out specially because he wanted James to stand out on stage. Every time James played that guitar, he was reminded that Elvis saw him as more than just a sideman. Elvis saw him as a partner in creating something magical. Years later, James still has that guitar, and he still gets emotional when he talks about what it means to him. As the 1970s went on, James started noticing scary changes in Elvis. The man who used to be perfect in every show was starting to forget words to songs. Sometimes Elvis would seem confused on stage, and James and the band had to keep the music going while Elvis found his way back. James described those shows as both heartbreaking and beautiful. Watching a hurt man still manage to touch people's hearts with his music. The final tour in summer 1977 was the hardest thing James ever had to watch. Elvis was clearly sick, but he refused to cancel the shows. James begged him to take a break, to get help, but Elvis wouldn't listen. "This is who I am," Elvis told James. "Without the music, what's left of me?" James knew then that Elvis would rather die performing than disappear from the world. It scared James, but he also understood it. Music was Elvis's life, and without it, Elvis felt like he was nothing. June 26, 1977 in Indianapolis was the last time James Burton and Elvis Presley performed together, though neither of them knew it at the time. James remembers that Elvis seemed different that night, more focused than he had been in months. When Elvis turned to James during their last song and said, "Play it, James," there was something special in his voice. It was like Elvis was saying goodbye through the music, putting everything he had left into that final moment they shared on stage. After the show, James and Elvis talked about the future. They made plans to record a gospel album together, something Elvis had always dreamed about. Elvis seemed hopeful, talking about making music that would heal people instead of just entertaining them. James left that night feeling good about his friend, having no idea it would be the last conversation they would ever have. On August 16, 1977, James got the phone call that changed everything. Elvis was dead. He had been found in his bathroom at Graceland by his girlfriend Ginger Alden. James was heartbroken. He had lost not just a musical partner, but a true friend who had trusted him with his deepest feelings. The first thing James thought about wasn't his own future or career. He thought about all the music Elvis would never get to make, all the songs that died with him. For months after Elvis died, James couldn't even touch his guitar. The pink Paisley Telecaster sat in its case, silent, while James struggled with grief and guilt. He kept thinking about whether he could have done more to help Elvis, whether he should have pushed harder for Elvis to get the help he needed. It took a long time for James to realize that Elvis made his own choices, and nobody could have saved him from himself. John Denver was the person who helped James get back to making music. John understood that the world needed James Burton's guitar, even when James couldn't see it himself. James worked with John Denver for 16 years, making 12 albums together and touring around the world. But even during those successful years, James carried Elvis with him everywhere he went. Every time he played guitar, he remembered those nights on stage with the King. Now that James is 85 years old, he's finally ready to talk about the real Elvis Presley. Not the Elvis from the movies or the magazines, but the man James knew personally. Elvis was kind, generous, and caring. He always asked about James's family and made sure everyone in the band felt important. If someone had a problem, Elvis would help. If someone was sick, Elvis would pay for their medicine. He didn't do these things for publicity. He did them because he had a good heart. James wants people to know that Elvis loved his fans more than anything. No matter how tired or sick he felt, Elvis would step on that stage and give everything he had. He never faked it, never pretended. When Elvis sang, the emotion was real. He wanted every person in the audience to leave feeling happy. That's what mattered most to Elvis, making other people feel good through his music. One thing that Elvis loved more than rock and roll was gospel music. James says that if Elvis had lived longer, he would have focused more on gospel. That's the music that really moved Elvis's soul. When Elvis sang gospel songs, James could see his spirit light up in a way that was different from everything else. Elvis felt something powerful in gospel music, something that connected him to God and to his roots in Mississippi. James also remembers the funny times with Elvis, like when they first heard the famous phrase, "Elvis has left the building." It started as a way to get crowds to leave after Elvis finished performing,